Hello, my loves. Back for another chapter today. This one's called Worship. Eragon was alone in the room when he woke. Scrawled onto the wall with a charcoal stick was a note that read, Eragon, I will be gone until late tonight. Coins for food are unmatched. Explore the city and stay unnoticed. Braum. P.S. Avoid the palace. Don't go anywhere without your bow. Keep it strung. Eragon wiped the wall clean, then retrieved the money from under the bed. He slipped the bow across his back, thinking, I wish I didn't have to go armed all the time. He left the Golden Globe and ambled through the streets, stopping to observe whatever interested him. There were many intriguing things, but not quite as exciting as Angela's herb shop in Tyr. At times, he glared at the dark, claustrophobic houses and wished they were free of the city. When he grew hungry, he bought a wedge of cheese and a loaf of bread and ate them. Later, in a far corner of Drosleone, he heard an auctioneer rattling off the list of prices. He heard a voice and arrived at a wide opening two-building. 10 men on a platform. Arrayed before them was a rich. Where are the goods for sale? Wondered Aaron. The auctioneer finished his list and motioned for a young man behind the platform to join him. The man awkwardly climbed up, chains dragging at his hands and feet. And here we have our first item, proclaimed the auctioneer. A healthy male from the Hatterack Desert, captured just last month, and in excellent condition. Look at those arms and legs. He's strong as a bull. He'd be perfect as a shield bearer, or if you don't trust him for that, hard labor. But let me tell you, lords and ladies, that would be a waste. He's bright as a nail if you can get him to talk a civilized tongue. The crowd laughed, and Eragon ground his teeth with fury. His lips started to form a word that would free the and his arm, newly liberated from the splint, rose. The mark on his palm shimmered. He was about to release the magic when it struck him. He'd never get away. The slave would be caught before he reached the city walls. Eragon would only make the situation worse if he tried to help. He lowered his arm and quietly cursed. Think! This is how you got into trouble with the Urgles. He watched helplessly as the slave was sold to a tall, hawk-nosed man. The next slave was a tiny girl no more than 6 years old, wrenched from the arms of her crying mother. As the auctioneer started the bidding, Eragon forced himself to play, rigid with fury and outrage. It was several blocks before the weeping was inaudible. I'd like to see a thief now, almost wishing it would happen. Frustrated, he punched a nearby wall, bruising his knuckles. That's the sort of thing I could stop by fighting the Empire, he realized. With Saphira by my side, I could free those slaves. I've been graced with special powers. It would be selfish of me not to use them for the benefit of others. If I don't, I might as well not be a writer at all. It was a while before he took stock of his bearings and was surprised to find himself before the cathedral. Its twisted spires were covered with statues and scrollwork. Snarling gargoyles crouched along the eaves. Fantastic beasts writhed on the walls, and heroes and kings along their bottom edges, frozen cold marble. Ribbed arches and tall glass windows lined the cathedral sides, along with columns of differing sizes. A lone turret helmed the building like a mast. Recessed in shadow at the cathedral's front was an iron-bound door inlaid with a row of silver script that Eragon recognized as the ancient language. As best he could tell, it read, May thee who enter here understand thine impermanence and forget thine attachments to that which is beloved. The entire building sent a shiver down Eragon's spine. There was something menacing about it, as if it were a predator crouched in the city waiting for its next victim. A broad row of steps led to the cathedral's entrance. Eragon solemnly ascended them and stopped before the door. I wonder if I can go in. Almost guiltily, he pushed on the door. It swung open smoothly, gliding on oiled hinges. He stepped aside. The silence of a forgotten tomb filled the empty cathedral. The air was chill and dry. Their walls extended to a vaulted ceiling that was so high, Eragon felt no taller than an ant. Stained glass windows depicting scenes of anger, hate, and remorse pierced the walls, while spectral beams of light washed sections of the granite pews with transparent hues, leaving the rest in shadow. His hands were shaded a deep blue. It is very windy. Between the windows stood statues with rigid, pale eyes. He returned their stern gazes, then slowly trod up the center row, afraid to break the quiet. His leather boots padded noiselessly on the polished stone floor. The altar was a great slab of stone devoid of adornment. A solitary finger of light fell upon it, illuminating motes of dust floating in the air. Behind the altar, the pipes of a wind organ pierced the ceiling and opened themselves to the elements. The instrument would play its music only when a gale rocked Drosleone. Out of respect, Eragon knelt before the altar and bowed his head. He did not pray, but paid homage to the cathedral itself. The sorrows of the lives it had witnessed, as well as the unpleasantness of the elaborate pageantry that played out between its walls, emanated from the stones. It was a forbidding place, bare and cold. In that chilling touch, though, there came a glimpse of eternity and perhaps the powers that lay there. Finally, Eragon inclined his head and rose. Calm and grave, he whispered words to himself in the ancient language, then turned to leave. He froze. His heart jumped, hammering like a drum. The Razak stood at the cathedral's entrance watching him. Their swords were drawn, keen edges bloody across the night. A sibilant hiss came from the Razak. Neither of them moved. Rage welled up in Eragon. He had chased the Razak for so many weeks that the pain of their murderous deed had dulled within him. But his vengeance was at hand. His wrath exploded like a volcano, fueled even more by his pent-up fury at the slave's plight. A roar broke from his lips, echoing like a thunderstorm as he snatched his bow from his back. Deftly, he fitted an arrow to the string and loosed it. 2 more followed an instant later. The Razak leapt away from the arrows with inhuman swiftness. They hissed as they ran up the aisle between the pews, cloaks flapping like raven wings. Eragon reached for another arrow, but caution stayed his hand. If they knew where to find me, Brahm is in danger as well. I must warn him. Then, to Eragon's horror, a line of soldiers filed into the cathedral, and he glimpsed a field of uniforms jostling outside the doorway. Eragon gazed hungrily at the charging Razak, then swept around, searching for means of escape. A vestibule to the left of the altar caught his attention. He bounded through the archway and dashed down a corridor that led to a priory with a belfry. The patter of the Razak's feet behind him made him quicken his pace until the hall abruptly ended with a closed door. He pounded against it, trying to break it open, but the wood was too strong. The Razak were nearly upon him. Frantic, he sucked in his breath and barked, "Jirda!" With a flash, the door splintered into pieces and fell to the floor. Eragon jumped into the small room and continued running. He sped through several chambers, stopping a group of priests. Shouts and curses followed him. The priory bell tolled an alarm. Eragon dodged through a kitchen, past a pair of monks, then slipped through a side door. He skidded to a stop in a garden surrounded by a high brick wall devoid of handholds. There were no other exits. Eragon turned to leave, but there was a low hiss as the Razak shouldered aside the door. Desperate, he rushed at the wall, arms pumping. Magic could not help him here. If he used it to break through the wall, he'd be too tired to run. He jumped. Even with his arms outstretched, only his fingertips cleared the edge of the wall. The rest of his body smashed against the bricks, driving out his breath. He gasped and hung there, struggling not to fall. The Razak prowled into the garden, swinging their heads from side to side like wolf-hounds, sniffing for prey. Eragon sensed their approach and heaved with his arms. His shoulders shrieked with pain as he scrambled onto the wall and dropped to the other side. He stumbled, then regained his balance and darted down an alley just as the Razak leapt over the wall. Galvanized, Eragon put on another burst of speed. He ran for over a mile before he had to stop and catch his breath. Unsure if he had lost the Razak, he found a crowded marketplace and dived under a parked wagon. How did they find me? He wondered, panting. They shouldn't have known where I was, unless something happened to Brahm. He reached out with his mind to Saphira and said, "The Razak found me. We're all in danger. Check if Brahm's all right. If he is, warn him and have him meet me at the inn. And be ready to fly here as fast as you can. We may need your help to escape." She was silent, then said curtly, "He'll meet you at the inn. Don't stop moving. You're in great danger." "Don't I know it," muttered Eragon as he rolled out from under the wagon. He hurried back to the Golden Globe, quickly packed their belongings, saddled the horses, and led them to the street. Brahm soon arrived, staff in hand, scowling dangerously. He swung onto Snowfire and asked, "What happened?" "I was in the cathedral when the Razak just appeared behind me," said Eragon, climbing onto Caddock. "I ran back as fast as possible, but they could be here any minute. Saphir will join us once we're out of Drosleona. We have to get outside the city walls before they close the gates, if they haven't already," said Brahm. "If they're shut, it'll be nigh impossible for us to leave. Whatever you do, don't get separated from me." Eragon stiffened as ranks of soldiers marched down one end of the street. Brahm cursed, lashed Snowfire with his reins, and galloped away. Eragon bent low over Caddock and followed. They nearly crashed several times during the wild, hazardous ride, plunging through masses of people that clogged the streets as they neared the city wall. When the gates finally came to view, Eragon pulled on Caddock's reins with dismay. The gates were already half closed, and a double line of pikemen blocked their way. "They'll cut us to pieces!" he exclaimed. "We'll have to try and make it," said Brahm, his voice hard. "I'll deal with the men, but you have to keep the gates open for us." Eragon nodded, gritted his teeth, and dug his heels into Caddock. They plowed toward the line of unwavering soldiers who lowered their pikes toward the horse's chest and braced the weapons against the ground. Though the horses sniffed fear, Eragon brought them in place. Eragon heard the soldiers shout, but kept his attention on the gate cinching shut. As they neared the sharp spikes, Brahm raised his hand and spoke. The words struck with precision. The soldiers fell to each side as if their legs had been cut out from under them. The gap between the gates shrank by the second. Hoping that the effort would not prove too much for him, Eragon drew on his power and shouted, "Du grind huldir!" A deep grating sound emanated from the gates as they trembled, then ground to a stop. The crowd and guards fell silent, staring with amazement. With the clatter of the horses' hooves, Brahm and Eragon shot out from behind Drosleona's wall. The instant they were free, Eragon released the gates. They shuddered, then boomed shut. He swayed with the expected fatigue, but managed to keep riding. Brahm watched him with concern. Their flight continued through the outskirts of Drosleona as alarm trumpets sounded on the city wall. Saphira was waiting for them by the edge of the city, hidden behind some trees. Her eyes burned, and her tail whipped back and forth. "Go. Ride her," said Brom, "and this time stay in the air, no matter what happens to me. I'll head south. Fly nearby. I don't care if Saphira's seen." Eragon quickly mounted Saphira. As the ground dwindled away from beneath him, he watched Brom gallop along the road. "Are you all right?" asked Saphira. "Yes," said Eragon, "but only because we were very lucky." A puff of smoke blew from her nostril. All the time we spent searching for the Razak was useless. "I know," he said, letting his head sag against her scales. "If the Razak had been the only enemies back there, I would have stayed and fought, but with all the soldiers on their side, it was hardly a fair match. You understand that there will be talk of us now? This was hardly an unobtrusive escape. Evading the Empire will be harder than ever." There was an edge to her voice that he was unaccustomed to. "I know." They flew low and fast over the road. Leona Lake receded behind them. The land became dry and rocky and filled with tough, sharp bushes and tall cactuses. Clouds darkened the sky. Lightning flashed in the distance. As it began to howl, Sif headed steeply down to Brom. He stopped the horses and asked, "What's wrong?" "The wind's too strong." "It's not that bad," objected Brom. "It is up there," said Eragon, pointing at the sky. Brom swore and handed him Caddock's reins. They trotted away with Saphira following on foot, though on the ground she had difficulty keeping up with the horses. The gale grew stronger, flinging dirt through the air and twisting like a dervish. They wrapped scarves around their heads to protect their eyes. Brom's robe flapped in the wind while his beard whipped about as if it had a life of its own. Though it would make them miserable, Eragon hoped it would rain so their tracks would be obliterated. Soon, darkness forced them to stop. With only the stars to guide them, they left the road and made camp behind 2 boulders. It was too dangerous to light a fire, so they ate cold food while Saphira sheltered them from the wind. After the sparse dinner, Eragon asked bluntly, "How did they find us?" Brom started to light his pipe, but thought better of it and put it away. "One of the palace servants warned me there were spies among them. Somehow, word of me and my questions must have reached Tabor, and through him, the Razak. We can't go back to Dras Leona, can we?" asked Eragon. Brom shook his head. "Not for a few years." Eragon held his head between his hands. "Then should we draw the Razak out? If we let Saphira be seen, they'll come running to wherever she is." "And when they do, there'll be 50 soldiers with them," said Brom. "At any rate, this isn't the time to discuss it. Right now, we have to concentrate on staying alive. Tonight will be the most dangerous because the Razak will be hunting us in the dark when they are the strongest. We'll have to trade watches until morning." "Right," said Eragon, standing. He hesitated and squinted. His eyes had caught a flicker of movement, a small patch of color that stood out from the surrounding nightscape. He stepped toward the edge of their camp, trying to see it better. "What is it?" asked Brom as he unrolled his blankets. Eragon stared into the darkness, then turned back. "I don't know. I thought I saw something. It must have been a bird." Pain erupted in the back of his head and Saphira roared. Then Eragon toppled to the ground, unconscious. That's the end of that chapter. Till the next one, love you so much.